Welcome to Codex Rex, the video game history podcast. I am your host, Tyler.
And I am your co-host, Dax.
Each episode, we tell a story about video game history and culture so that you can learn a little bit more about the games that you love. Hi, Dax. It's good to see you.
It is good to see you too. For everybody listening, you have kind of arrived into a multi-part sub-series of the podcast where we spend like several episodes talking about the history of id Software.
Correct.
If you just pop in now, but you want to listen to the earlier episodes, just move 2 episodes back to episode 29, I think, and listen to the id Software 3-hour prologue to what this is all about.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen how our second episode is still being edited. I haven't actually seen how long that will be, but we had a good laugh about how the prologue to this series was our longest episode ever. Yeah. And people in the Discord asked me, and quote, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And I said, I can't help myself. I can't stop. So I hope that you all are enjoying it so far as we continue forward. But yeah, Stocks is right. This is a series. This episode will get us about halfway, I think, through this series. So
shall we pretend that the time passed from our last recording to this recording, and we just ask each other how we've been, even though we've been spending the last 4 hours together recording?
Yeah,
episode
let's
2.
pretend like we didn't just take a break and eat a bunch of cookies and drink coffee and talk as if we had time had passed. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So anyway, I've been playing role-playing games with a buddy of mine, and he's this really fun guy, and he's always coming to me and bringing like really interesting role-playing games I'd never played, or like really weird systems. Like one week he hit us up and was like, "Hey, do you want to play a Viking role-playing game where you use like physical runes, and I'll send you like a bunch of Viking runes in the mail?" And I was like, you don't even have to ask me the answer to that question. You know the answer is yes. Just send me the fucking runes. And then an envelope showed up, and a bunch of like fucking laser cut Viking runes fell out of the envelope, and I was like, this is the greatest fucking day of my life. But anyway, he is having us play this game called Slug Blaster, and I'm just so enamored with like the art style of it. In short, you are a teenager in an alternate Earth, like 90s. So it's still the 90s, but technology has like, most technology is still the same. So you still have like flip phones and shit, but they invented hoverboards that can slice through reality. And so the role-playing game has sort of like a set number of missions you'll do. Like the DM sort of figures out how long it's going to be, and then you sort of go through growing up as a teenager, and the game like builds that in. So you're like doing stuff at home and like doing your homework and shit, but then also you're using your fucking sick hoverboard and like AI robot to like blip into other dimensions and do like fucking sweet skate tricks as you're being like chased by robots. And I just thought it was fucking awesome and just totally oozed charm. So I'm really excited about that.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah, really, really fun.
I'm really thirsty for any kind of role-playing game as well.
Yeah.
So I totally get your excitement for this. I've been really wanting to try a board game recently, but I can't get hold of it. It's called City of Six Moons.
Oh.
And it's a board game, and the person that created it basically wrote that it's a game that was discovered, and it is a game of an alien civilization, and all the play pieces and the boards, everything is written in an alien language, and you can't read it. So you can't read the instructions for the game, and the game is figuring out what the game is.
That's so weird.
And it is such a weird game, and it's been sold out. It's like there's like a huge hype for it. It's called City of Six Moons. It's a single player game, a single player board game.
Oh.
And I've been trying to get hold of it, but I can't get it. It's like all the suppliers have run out of the game pieces. They can't get it anymore. They say maybe in 3 months they get new versions of it. So I will just have to wait to see if someone somewhere will sell this game, and I just want to have it because it's completely up my alley.
Yeah,
it reminds me of The Return of the Obra Dinn, but even more obscure.
Oh yeah.
stuff like that.
That game, so if you've not played Oberdin, whatever, what a fantastic game. Docs turned me onto that at one point, and I'm not, like, I'll admit, like, I'm not bad at puzzle games, but when I stream puzzle games, I have streamer brain, and then I feel really stupid because I don't have time to puzzle out a puzzle like I normally would and, like, struggle. I have to, like, be in front of people who give me shit because I'm bad at puzzles. But even with all of that, I thought that game was fucking fantastic. It was so good. And so you tell me even like a small analog to that, and I'm about it. I'll tell you, while you were mentioning this, I wanted to look up pieces to that game, and it looks really cool. And I found a site. Okay, don't get too excited, but I found a site, and it said in stock. Okay, and I was like, oh shit, in stock, I'm going to tell him. And then I skimmed down, and it says, we have run out of our supply of wooden pieces.
Yes.
So there you are. It's still
and I've seen that site, and in that little text it says they have run out of the wooden pieces that they get from their German supplier. Mm-hmm. So I'm close to it. It is somewhere around me in this country. They will send the wooden pieces from my country to the USA, and then at some point I will order it from the USA so they can send the wooden pieces in another box back to me. This is globalization for you.
Yes. That's incredible. Okay. I guess we should tell people where to find us. If you want to send us an email, and I highly encourage you to do so, send us an email at codexrexpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to hang out with us, I stream a couple nights a week on Twitch. My Twitch handle is Vegan Tyler. Pretty easy to find. And then you can find a number of different links either on my page or on our socials to our Discord, and you can come hang out with us. Also, in previous episodes, I mentioned that we were on Twitter, and then since the time that I made a Twitter account, Twitter got bought by the richest man in the world, who, no surprise, turned out to be an absolute fuckhead, and he has now taken over that site. And so I have migrated our social media presence to Blue Sky. So if you're on Blue Sky, you can pop on by. We're easy to find. We're just Codex Rex, same little icon and everything. So that's where you'd find us.
Shall we begin the episode?
Let's fucking do it. All right, let's do it.
Let's go.
Let's go. So what I did for this series of episodes, because there are so many images, you are not required as a listener to do this. But if you feel like something just a little extra, in the show notes, I've been including links to the PowerPoints and the slides if you want to see kind of what we're looking at as I walk through with docs. But no requirement. We'll get you through this without it if you don't feel like it. Just thought I'd note it. All right. When we last met, spoke with, heard about, whatever, our intrepid id Software folks, they had finished the Commander Keen series. They'd finished episode 5, episode 6. They were sitting down to work on more Commander Keen, and they had made the decision that they did not want to work on Commander Keen anymore collectively, and that they instead wanted to work on something else. And at which point, John Romero blurts out, we need to do something cool. You know, it'd be really fucking cool if we made a remake of Castle Wolfenstein and did it in 3D. Now.
Yeah, let's go. Wolfenstein.
If you are listening.
That is a famous game.
Yes, the original is a famous game as well. So I'll just give you a very small bit of backstory. I played Castle Wolfenstein 3D as a child. We're starting to get into things I actually played, not just for the podcast. I did not know that there was an original Castle Wolfenstein that Castle Wolfenstein 3D was a remake of. The original Castle Wolfenstein came out in 1981 and was made by a man named Silas Warner for the Apple II. The point of the game is that you are a prisoner of war in World War II, and you are trying to steal the Nazis' secret plans and then escape. It was mostly an adventure game where you can use various ways to get past enemies. You can fight them, you can steal their uniforms and impersonate them, you can sneak, you do all kinds of stuff. But what was cool about this original game is that the castle was procedurally generated. So the arrangement of the rooms is different every time you play it. And you had to walk between the rooms, so you never knew what room you would walk into. So it's kind of a little different every time. And for 1981, I think that this is pretty cool. Romero, in one interview, called it the original stealth shooter, if that gives you an idea of what it played like.
It was such a revolutionary game. It's incredible. And the IP persists to this day.
It does, yes.
Because it's so iconic.
Do you want to describe just a little bit about what's on the screen? To give you just a lead in, there are the box arts for Castle Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, but you can tell me what the rest of it looks like.
Okay, so you kind of see the cover art for the games. On the right one, you see like a weird version of Adolf Hitler wearing his hat, and there's like the soldier running, like kind of ducked down, holding a gun in his hand. And in the middle, like the in-game title screen, you can see Castle Wolfenstein in the background. And on the top of the game, it's hard to describe. It's very basic graphics, how you would imagine it from 1981. Like you can see very simple sprites for the enemies, very simple sprites for the boxes, and like there's like 5 or 6 colors that are used to basically show everything. And you can move around through these walled rooms with different obstacles.
Yeah.
Looks pretty neat, very basic, but it was very complex in its simplicity.
Yeah, to add to this, what was really fascinating about this game too is that Silas, this is thought to be one of the first video games that had recorded speech in it. Silas used his own voice for the German characters, and the quality was pretty bad, but it was like really jarring to be playing a game where suddenly it's yelling at you, right? Totally novel in 1981. And so there was a sequel later called Beyond Castle Wolfenstein. It added more things. You know, that might be a fun little one-off one day, but just wanted to give you the backstory of why they were thinking about this game. And they're like, let's do a remake, okay? So the guys are in on this idea because everyone in the room, minus Adrian, had played the original. Ideas start flowing. They're like, the whole thing's going to be in 3D. Maybe you could drag the bodies around and steal their stuff. But the big thing is they wanted it to be fast, they wanted it to be fun, and they wanted it to be bloody. There was nothing like that on the PC at this point, and they thought that this would really shake up the market. As Romero put it, quote, "It will be just shocking, a totally shocking game." Also around this time, the team finally made the decision to fire Carmack's friend Jason. As I mentioned in the previous episode, he had kind of been like a light hanger-on. He had done some work for them, but they're like, this isn't working out. They boot him off the team. Sorry, Jason.
They finally managed to tell him to leave. If you listen to the last episode, he kind of just showed up and then he just kind of disappeared.
Yep.
Maybe he played a greater role and they were just ungrateful for his work. And I don't know.
Whatever it was, out he went. He wasn't a good fit. So now the team is officially down to, okay, I have a picture here. Adrian, Tom, Carmack, Romero. They have Bobby Prince sort of as a contractor from time to time. Scott Miller is sort of their contact at Apogee, and they have a temporary president, Mark Rain.
They still have Mark Rain, even though he signed that contract without consulting them beforehand.
They still have Mark Rain. Yes, he's still around.
Oh, no.
On to the game. They needed a name for it. They wanted to use the Wolfenstein name, but they figured that they probably couldn't for copyright reasons, right? It had already been a game. So they start brainstorming. They're going to make a game kind of like Castle Wolfenstein. And they brainstorm a bunch of names. Just for funsies, I'm going to list some of the names that they came up with. The Fourth Reich. Deep in Germany. Castle Hasselhoff. Luger Me Now.
The Hasselhoff meme already existed at that time. That is very funny.
I'm gonna fuck these. I did this to myself. Dolchstoffel, Devil Dagger, Dolchstoffel. Is that right?
Dolchstiefel, Dolchteufel.
Dolchteufel. Yeah. Okay. There you go. Dolchteufel. That's how I have it. I don't know. Oh
That's
God.
Good. Oh, good.
Geruchschlecht. Bad smell. That's what they had it as, bad smell. Geruchschlecht. I don't know. I'm not.
Geruch. Geruch. Can you write it to me? Because I can't understand what you're saying.
Here, I'll spell it. Okay, hold on. It's here. This is what I have in my notes.
Schlecht. Okay, this is someone. Okay, bad smell, and this is someone kind of pretending to understand how, like, German does these composite words where you can put words together. It takes the word for smell and bad and puts them together as if this is how composite works always work, but they don't. Like, we don't. We have words for bad smell, but that is not it, and that is not a German word.
Oh man, hilarious. So all these are not great, right? Like none of these are as good as Wolfenstein. Like Wolfenstein's great, right?
Yes.
So they're like, all right, fuck it. Like we can't come up with a good name, throw it onto the back burner. We're not calling it Castle Hasselhoff or whatever the fuck it is. Let's just wait.
Yep.
So they start putting out preliminary work. All the character sprites were going to be more work than their previous games because what they wanted to do was be able to see the enemies at every angle, including their backs.
That is so much work. Yeah.
It's so much, yeah. Here are some drawings that Tom did of like what he thought some of the enemies were going to look like. Just like some very basic things that he was doing on what you can tell are sort of lined paper. And as you can clearly see, this is Hitler in a like mech suit. Like
yeah, but that was like, that. I mean, I don't think that's a spoiler, but that is going to be in the game. It's like yeah.
Oh,
absolutely. They were really into mech suit Hitler. Yeah. So that was a very early idea. That is cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like right out of the gate. And so on the right here, you can also see just one sprite of the enemies in Wolfenstein. And, you know, it's not much to describe other than it's just one guy in a soldier's outfit from like a ton of different angles. And
it's just the entire walking animation from all angles. Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, just to give you an idea of just how many different angles he would have to draw in those sprites, it was a lot of work, and we'll come back to that a little later.
So just for the walking, they would have to do 40 pictures. 40 little. And these, like, try to do pixel art if you ever want to get an idea for how difficult it is to get these well. And this is, like, if you look at the previous games and if you look at these sprites, this is such high quality. They have made such a leap. It's incredible.
It really
is really good.
And so fast.
The shading of the sprites is insane. This is really great.
Yeah, kudos to Adrian, for real.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks in, they get a call from Scott at Apogee, and he wants to know how things are going. And they tell him what they want to make. They want to make a remake of Castle Wolfenstein, and he is just so into this. He loves their idea. Take Wolfenstein, and instead of being this slow stealth game, you're going to make it loud, you're going to make it fast. He guarantees them a payout of at least $100,000, okay? But he suggests that they upgrade their graphics. So part of the reason you're looking at this and it looks so much better is because he wanted them to go from what's called EGA to VGA, okay? Quote, forget EGA, it's the past. If you don't know what this is, imagine that you're basically upgrading in the PC world from being able to show 16 colors at the same time to multiple brackets of 256 colors at the same time. Massive difference in what you can create art-wise.
It multiplies your colors by 16, yeah.
Yep. He also tells them on this call, just as a little side note before we talk more about EGA and VGA, that while the money is pouring in, that their sort of little gamble on the Commander Keen trilogy where they had to split it up, that it's not doing as well, right? It is, as he expected, a dual retail and shareware release cut into sales for the game. That doesn't mean it was doing bad, but it was not doing nearly as well as they expected it to because they had to cut it up. Okay. But yes, anyway, the change from EGA to VGA would be a big one. Romero pitches it to Carmack. Carmack thinks about it and says, quote, it would be cleaner code-wise, and I could do it at high speed. And he thinks about it and he's in. They're going to change, okay? They're going to make this big graphical upgrade. They talked to FormGen at this time. Remember, FormGen is who published the Commander Keen game.
Yep.
As part of their contract, they needed to make another retail game. And when Romero tells them that they are making a, quote, 3D World War II Nazi blast fest, end quote, FormGen gets a little nervous. One of the owners Romero is talking to tells him that they don't want to go, quote, digging up that World War II stuff, end quote. But Romero tells him basically, sorry, this is what we're making, deal with it. And they just go, okay, and they agree to publish the game.
Oh, that's lucky. Okay.
It's very lucky. Right? That's very lucky. I just want to know.
This will not be the last time that they will get into trouble for choosing this kind of game.
For sure. I also just want to note here, these deals that they're making were a big thing at the time because id is essentially playing in two markets at once. Most people, they would make shareware games or they'd make retail games, not both. But id is double dipping. This is like these dual releases that they're doing would allow them to tap more players. And Carmack thinks that the things he learned from making Catacomb 3D that we talked about in the last episode would really make the game fast. And he starts setting himself to optimizing his code. And it didn't take him long. Again, he decides to only draw the walls but leave the ceilings and floors in a flat color. Romero's coming up with ideas. You'd have to fight Nazi soldiers, but what about attack dogs? And what kind of weapons would we have? There'd be blood, just tons of blood. And Tom Hall, as we mentioned earlier, comes up with this idea that they're going to fight Hitler at the end and he's going to be in this mech suit, right? There's just all these ideas are flying around. They're just so excited.
There's even a sketch of one of the little bosses, Fettgesicht, and I think he also shows up in the game. For some reason, I recently watched like a compilation of all Wolfenstein 3D bosses, just because I liked the game and I wanted to see it.
Uh-huh.
And this is like a sketch that basically shows all of the, like a few of the bosses that are in the game already, which is really cool. Like to the bottom left, the guy, he's also a boss.
Yeah, and the one in the middle, isn't he the doctor? Is that supposed to be the doctor?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Something poison right. Maker, it says there, baby. Yeah, so...
Yeah. The Giftmischer, yeah.
Okay, so they set themselves to the task of having players do stuff from the original game. So, like, you could search bodies, you could drag bodies around behind you, you could put on Nazi uniforms and sneak by guards, you could steal shit from them. But as they played... they found that they were just having a ton of fun just mowing down enemies and just instead of like sneaking around levels and doing things, they're just like, this is just way more fun to go blow away a bunch of Nazis. So they start cutting things out ever so lightly. Not all at once, but as Romero put it, quote, anything that's going to stop us from mowing shit down, get rid of it.
It's such a visceral experience, like these kinds of first-person shooters that get really into the mowing down of hordes of enemies. I think my favorite example from a more modern game is always Vermintide 2.
Oh yeah,
how like it kind of gets the feeling of this slaughter down to perfection. It's insane. Yep. So it must have been crazy to be like the first people to discover it, because this was probably also a graphical issue to even make a game that has as many enemies to mow down.
Right.
And once the engine was set up and once the levels could kind of just be popped full of enemies, and then they were like just mowing down enemies and they had this sensation inside of them, and they kind of discovered something that would be like an essential part of this kind of industry for the next until now for the rest of the video game industry.
Yeah, this is like truly like the cutting edge of what games would turn into in a lot of ways.
So I understand that was a good decision. Cut down on everything, just go with mowing down people. I totally get it.
Yep. There is something we'll talk about a little bit later where they wanted to have extra stuff to do in the game other than just run from room to room and shoot things, but we'll talk about that and some minor challenges that they went through. So this upgrade to VGA, it ends up being a really good one. Adrian now has just an absolutely truly massive amount of colors to play with. He's designing their color palette. He's figuring it out. Tom's doing drawings for him, as I mentioned. And even though they decide in the shareware game that there's only going to be 4 enemies, okay? With only 4 enemies, it was still a ton of work for a single artist. Further, they wanted their sound to be improved even further than the last couple of games. And I've like heard Carmack talk about like these games leading up to Wolfenstein as almost like them having their training wheels on, and that this is really when they started to take off. So they want this sound to be improved. The Sound Blaster sound card that was popular at the time, it was in a lot of computers, it would allow them to have digital playback of sounds. In consultation with Bobby Prince, the guy that helped them with sound before, they made the decision to use digital audio, which was the first for the company. Okay. But they also made this decision. What if you didn't have a Sound Blaster card? Well, they still wanted people to be able to play their games. So they basically put two different versions of the music in the game. Okay. So if you had the card, the music would be in MIDI, but if it wasn't, it would let you play what was called the PC speaker version. And
that's cool.
Right? I thought this was a really nice way to make it backward compatible.
Very, very inclusive.
Right? Just make your market as big as possible. They were particularly interested in getting Bobby to make good sounds for the weapons. And when Romero got to test the game with sound for the first time, he was so thrilled with the weapon sounds that he fell over laughing and laughing and laughing. He was just so excited. And he said, there's never been another game like this.
And he's right.
He is. He absolutely is.
Wolfenstein 3D is a masterpiece. It's really good.
One day in February of 1992, we're going to shift a little bit. One day in February of 1992, a package showed up at the offices of Sierra Online. If you haven't heard of Sierra before, it was one of the biggest video game publishers in the industry in 1992. Ken and Roberta Williams, the husband and wife duo who founded the company, opened up this package, and inside is a copy of Commander Keen in Goodbye Galaxy, and it came with a note from John Romero, which said that he was part fanboy, part business. He had heard that Roberta had been interested in publishing games for children, and so he decided to send along a copy of Commander Keen in Goodbye Galaxy. He told her that it was doing well in the shareware market, and that he wondered if they had any interest in putting together a new IP for a children's game and publishing it through Sierra, because Sierra had just recently started publishing kids' games. And he's like, I think this would be a good fit. Let's work together.
Yep.
It's just total shot in the dark. Classic fucking Romero, right? To just like
classic Romero.
Call up whoever's in charge or send him a thing and just be like, hey, right? Like no pretenses, just do it, right?
At least by now he has a reputation.
Yes.
Like the first times he did it, he was just a kid.
Right? Ken and Roberta are impressed by this. And perhaps unexpectedly, they ask the team if they would come to Sierra, and she tells him that she wants to talk business. The team starts freaking out. Or as Romero put it in his GDC talk, oh shit. They had all grown up playing Sierra games, and now a bunch of guys working out of an apartment would be going to visit a company that was making almost $1 billion a year at this time. And Ken Williams was this hero to them. This is a big deal. So they decide to put together a demo of Wolfenstein as well in the event that Sierra wants to negotiate with them. The team flies out to Oakhurst, California. Mark Rain, who is living in Toronto, he flies in, and they all meet up, and they are just generally thrilled to get away from snowy Wisconsin for a time. They're all very excited at the prospect of this meeting. They're like, oh my God, it's warm, right?
Sunshine, what?
The Sierra office building was this huge metal thing, and they go in, and there are more than 200 people working there. So imagine there's like 5 guys working out of an apartment, and they just show up to this massive gaming company. Quite a difference from what they are all used to, okay? And the team gets to the building, and by several accounts, they look awful. They are just generally unkept, unshaved, wearing clothes with all these holes in them. They just look like shit. And they're just given this tour of the offices, and they're just like being weirdo 20-somethings who work on games in isolation for months. And at one point, they get introduced to this guy, Warren Schwader, who was a really famous Apple II programmer, and Romero and Tom throw themselves on the ground in front of him and start doing the bit from Wayne's World where they start going, we're not worthy, right? This makes me fucking cringe hearing about it. But for those who weren't there in the 90s, this was like sort of a little bit of popular culture in that time. And like, I wouldn't say it was that common, but like it did happen occasionally. It was cringy, but it did happen.
I think Wayne's World must have been such an influential piece of culture that it was kind of okay to do that, I think. Like, yeah. I wasn't there, like, alive.
Right.
Like, I was alive, but not that alive that I could have understood. But
yeah, I
understand how important Wayne's World was. So I think it's okay.
For sure.
Especially for nerds.
Especially for nerds, absolutely. I also read a story that Carmack started talking to some programmer at the company and then just like unprompted starts ripping apart this programmer about his coding choices. Like the whole thing was just really weird, but like whatever. So Ken and Roberta, they see them, like they clearly see these guys as like a bunch of naive kids who have no business experience, right? They're like, what is this? And so
let's rip these guys off. Let's do it.
Right now, turn of events here might be ever so lightly out of order, but I know that like at one point in time they wanted to talk business, and Ken, he starts asking them about how the shareware model is working for them, because remember Ken is doing retail, and you know all of Sierra is retail at this time, and he asks them, how much are you making? And Romero tells them, quote, a little over $50,000 a month in sales, end quote. Ken goes from like really happy, like, oh, here are these fun kids. He gets very serious and he goes, no way, that's not possible. And Romero said that because they're just totally independent, they're geographically like isolated from pretty much every other developer, like not all developers. There were some developers in Madison, but very few. They had no idea whether or not that was a lot of money or not, right? So like Romero, by one account, said something to the effect of like, we make the best stuff in shareware and that's why we're making so much money, very confidently. And then he pulls out id Software's last 3 bank deposits, like their earnings statements of how much they were putting into the bank, and just shows it to Ken, and Ken is just stunned. And his like stunned reaction made them really proud. And Romero said that he thought if he was impressed, we must be doing very well indeed. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The next step was to take them all out to a fancy restaurant. And then they got stopped at the door because they were all dressed like shit. And Ken explains, Ken is like a regular at this restaurant. They all know him. He explains that they are actually all very important guests. And they put them into this like back room with this like long banquet table that they gave them. Quote, it might have been the most posh, fancy experience I'd ever had in my 24 years on this planet. It felt like I was in a dream. The Williamses ran a great company and made great games. It was like we were commoners dining with the king and queen. So
that's so cool for them to be like this is like getting knighted, right? Like
yeah,
you meet the biggest heroes of that time, the most successful people of that time, and then they treat you with respect, and that kind of tells you that you belong there. I'm glad for them that they had that experience.
I agree. Yeah, I think this is really cool. Now, back at the hotel, Mark Rain kind of corners them, and he tells them that he thinks a major deal is about to happen. And so because of that, he wants company stock. He wants in. And Romero tells him, no way. You are in a probationary period to get a job, not ownership of the company. Like, this is our deal. You're sticking with the deal, right? The next day, the team goes to Ken and Roberta's house in the mountains. They get invited over to their house. Okay, I have pictures of Ken and Roberta's house up in the mountains, and Roberta holding her little dog and like their little foyer area.
That is such a nice house.
It's such a nice house. I would live in that house. Oh my god.
That is also a very American house. So like I can look at it for 10 seconds and be fine with it, and then I'm like, oh, Americans.
It's a very outdated...
Learn to build upwards, guys. Upwards.
No, outward. Outward. Take up as much space as possible.
Yeah.
It does look like it has an upstairs, though, if we look at the steps there. But no, it's just it's very, to me, this reads, this was built maybe a decade or two previous. It's kind of supposed to be like a cabin kind of style thing. You know, it's very old style, you know, not even really modern for that time period. But they're just really excited to be there. And the team's really excited. Here's these two developers. They had looked up to them for so long, and they're like hanging out at their fucking house, right? And Tom goes off to look at like upcoming game design documents with Roberta. Romero, he had sort of like expecting that they might like want to show off what they were doing with Wolfenstein. He installs an early build of Wolfenstein on Ken's PC, and he is so excited to show off this totally groundbreaking game to one of his heroes. And he puts it in, and he goes through the demo, and he shows it to him, and he waits for Ken's response. And Ken goes, "That's cool. Let me show you Red Baron." And then he just moves over and puts in like Red Baron Online that they were working on and just totally blows off Wolfenstein. Quote, "I was stunned. I had just demoed a groundbreaking 3D game that represented a whole new paradigm, a VGA texture-mapped first-person shooter with more depth and detail than any other game out there. And his response was to show me a flight simulation game in a genre that had been around since the 1970s. He didn't quite appreciate it. So
he didn't quite appreciate it. But that's what you get. If you want to play with the big fish might have been around a while, and they might have grown a bit rusty. So.
Yep, absolutely. Whether or not Ken fully understood what id was bringing to the table, he was still, however, very interested in the team and their shareware model. The next day they meet at the office and they're talking business again. And the id team had this laptop with them, and on it was an image that Adrian made. Okay, it looked like this. id Software, part of the Sierra family, it says.
Oh.
And it has like...
teaser.
Right? So it has like Commander Keen being chased by an alien, right? So Adrian made this quick little mock-up, right? And they show it to him. They show it to Ken. And Ken says, "Do you mind removing the question mark?" Okay? So it says, id Software, part of the Sierra family, question mark? And he's like, remove that question mark. You are part of the Sierra family, right? And then he offers them $2.5 million.
What?
Oh, yeah. In return.
But for what?
In return, id would become an in-house development studio within Sierra. And as a measure of his seriousness, Ken offers them upfront payment in Sierra stock. Romero tells Ken that this is basically an incredible offer, but they're going to have to talk about it after they go home. They're going to go home to Wisconsin. They're going to sit on this. They're going to discuss everything. The guys go back to their apartment and they talk this out. This was a lot of money. This is a lot of money. This was like, I think,
a lot of money.
I think Romero might have said in his GDC talk that this was, if they like mapped out what they were going to be making in a year, that this was like 4 years of like their best sales that they just get up, like basically up front, right, to be bought out. And they,
yeah, insane.
And there's a hesitation though, because there's definitely a culture clash between the two companies. And Romero says, "Do you know how long it will take us to make this kind of money? If we do this, we will make it all in one day." But there's hesitation. They just don't know what to do. So Romero pitches this. Okay, let's do the same tactic that they did with Scott Miller. If Sierra is truly serious about this, let's ask this. Give us $100,000 down. Okay? It's a small chunk of what the original offer was. If they're truly serious, they'll give us this money. We'll take the deal. If not, we pass. He calls Ken Williams, asks him to modify the deal. And Romero thinks this is a pretty small chunk of change comparatively, right? Ken hears this. He's not interested in the deal anymore. He's impressed with them, but he's not $100,000 up front impressed. The team decides that Sierra doesn't value Wolfenstein. They just don't understand what they have. And they also decide they're against the deal. If they're not going to give us something up front, if they're not going to invest in Wolfenstein, we're done. They would remain independent. They would stay out of being owned by another company. They thought there's going to be nothing like this game, and if Sierra doesn't want it, that's their loss. It doesn't need them. Or as Romero put it at the time, fuck Sierra and their loser programmers.
I understand the decision, though.
I do too.
Just like selling, but they probably would have sold their creative freedom, which was probably their biggest asset at the time.
Yeah, it absolutely.
And
They were able to operate in so many different markets in so many different ways in the future because they remained independent, and they become increasingly independent as time goes on.
Just from the Sierra games that I've known, and maybe I'm incorrect about this, but as far as I know, Sierra has always put a big focus on creating family-friendly games.
Yeah.
And this would have totally taken a big part of the soul out of ID Software that basically had their entire base upon being punk, being edgy, and being very, very obviously against accepted norms of what is adequate to do and not. So yeah. I think this was the right decision.
I do too.
And they make a ton of money. They do make a ton of money. It's not like they need it.
It's true. The team turns their attention back toward Wolfenstein. Things started coming along pretty well. The engine's looking pretty good. They had several enemy Nazis in the game. The AI's looking good for, what they do when they walk around. They even set up a new feature where you could be within a specific sound zone. Because what they wanted to do is, they wanted enemies to sort of hear you do things, right? And then come running. But they wanted to set it up so that if you opened a door, the whole level didn't come running then. Just certain areas, sort of creating a radius that enemies could hear you in. So if you did an action in a specific zone, the enemies in that zone would come to you, okay? Rather than the whole level.
To have proximity-based sound effects.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So...
That's
and
cool.
then if you opened a door, then that would connect the sound zones, and then enemies in that room could hear, right? And so it really gave them a lot to play with, right?
Yes.
Also, the team kept their long-running D&D game going, but through that winter, the storyline started getting a bit darker.
Can we just every 30 minutes say, and they also kept playing D&D?
I promise you, the reason I keep talking about their D&D campaign is, one, because I think these guys were going crazy being stuck inside, and two, the D&D campaign has direct effects on games that come later.
Yep.
So the storyline starts getting darker. Some of the plot of the game involved demons, and at one point their team was hiding out in a pocket dimension. Romero's character was in possession of something they called the Demonomicron, which controlled the demon's ability to enter the material plane. But his character was presented with a choice. He could give the leader of the demons the book, and in return he would be gifted a powerful sword called the Daikatana, as well as some other powerful artifacts. By the way, Daikatana just is a real rough translation in Japanese to big sword. You would get the big sword, the Daikatana. Okay?
Nice.
And Romero takes it. He's like, yeah, sure. And he gives away this book. And that turns out to be a terrible decision. It allows all of the demons to teleport to the material plane. And after they play several sessions of trying to stem the tide, the world they had been playing in was obliterated. Destroyed. Romero said he was crushed when it all ended. They had spent hundreds of hours in the world that Carmack had made, and now it was gone. Romero said years later, quote, "I still have no idea why he allowed his world to end like that. Maybe he was tired of playing with us, or was an absolute stickler for the rules." End quote. But the team never played D&D again.
As someone who plays D&D a lot, something that I have learned is that if you stay strictly to the rules, you have more respect for what happens. So I learn to follow the dice, and if the dice tell me, and if I plan something that the dice will do, I will not fudge what happens, because for the rest of my life it will reek of that. And I will always think back to it and be like, this wasn't a real experience, this was fudged. I will have to lie about this for the rest of my life. And so I have fudged rolls when I was younger, but I don't do anymore. I stick to what happens, and it makes games feel much more fun.
Yeah, and I think that's a completely legitimate way to do that. And I think that, it really depends on what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, what story are you trying to tell, is it collaborative, do you railroad them, what your goal is, and
Absolutely. Don't do what's fun for you.
Absolutely.
Just saying my personal experience.
Yeah. So, but anyway, he ends the campaign. So they've been playing this campaign for a while, a long time, hundreds of hours, every weekend, sometimes multiple times. It's gone. Okay. Killed by demons. Not ominous at all. With Wolfenstein, they start realizing that they might need some help, especially with the art of the game. They start talking about who they might bring in, and a guy named Kevin Cloud comes up. There's Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
He had been the editorial director at Softdisk and had been one of their friends when everything went down, right? Like everything went down at Softdisk. They had sort of known him. To give you his vibe, he was described as having sort of a cowboy style and was very quiet, but he loved riffing with Romero and Tom. So he's like, I can play with the boys, right? Like, even though he's this quiet, reserved kind of guy.
Oh, God. I'm not... riffing with Romero and Tom means he makes alien noises the entire time when he speaks.
It was never really clear, other than that he was just like in on all the jokes too. So.
Oh, okay, good.
After the id guys left the company, Kevin had acted as a liaison between id and Softdisk to try and allow id to have as much freedom as possible. So, like, when they needed to contact id, like, he would sometimes be the guy that would do that. So they call Kevin and they ask him, do you have any interest in joining the team? They wanted to officially interview him, but if the answer was yes, he would have to move to Madison, Wisconsin, remember? So Kevin agrees for various reasons. He was ready to leave his job at Softdisk, and also he had just gotten married and he and his wife wanted to start like somewhere new. Okay, they wanted to just pick up and go somewhere new.
Oh, yeah, and working with Romero usually is good for your marriage, right? So
yes.
That's a good thing to do.
Yeah, the 14-hour development days are fantastic for maintaining a relationship with another human, for
Absolutely.
sure. Yes, very good.
Yeah.
They understand, they do, that you can just never be there. Yeah. So, he and his wife pack up all their belongings, drive 19 hours, and show up at the door of the id apartment at 8 a.m. John Carmack opens the door, half asleep, literally in his underwear, looks at them, and just says, "Come back later," and shuts the door in their face.
Honey, I have a new job. We are going to this place. We have to drive 19 hours. But they provide me, they will pay me, and they will provide us with housing, and we will go there, and it will be a fantastic opportunity for us to basically build life savings, kind of go on this little adventure as a couple, and you will see as soon as we get there that this will be a great experience in which our relationship can grow.
Of course, Kevin, I trust you utterly. I would love to meet your new potential coworkers.
And then this happens.
Oh, this isn't even the end of it.
Oh boy. Oh, man.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, Kevin.
So they're surprisingly undeterred. And they're like, okay, we'll go get some coffee. And they go get some coffee. And then Kevin comes back later and he meets the whole team. They do an interview. They determine Kevin's going to be a great fit. They offer him a spot. He accepts. Okay, he's going to be on the team. Now, I think I had mentioned
he did a 19-hour drive for an interview. I mean, they probably had some renown by then. A lot, probably. Yeah, but still,
they were
19-hour drive for an interview is crazy.
Oh, it is absolutely crazy. I mean, like, I think he thought, and I can't speak for him, but I think he thought, like, okay, this is pretty much a done deal when I get there, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna crush this, and yeah.
Right.
Yeah, probably.
I think that I had mentioned earlier that the apartment complex that they had worked in had started having issues, and that there had been a lot more like drug deals, police visits. Some of those police visits ended in drug raids. Their neighbors are getting arrested and like doors are getting kicked down. And so the team is starting...
it's a very shady place, yeah.
Right. So the team was already looking for a new place to move the office and also themselves. And so the team and Kevin and his wife, they all decide, like, if Kevin's going to live here, then maybe we should all just go out and look at apartments, right? Like, we'll all just go, we'll figure out where we're going to live. She can be a part of this, you know, everybody's here. And they find a complex that they're all happy with, right? They're all like, cool, we're all going to live together in our big complex house. They seem like this is a great deal. Like, they're happy with us. They go out to dinner. Everyone, including Kevin, decides, we like this place. We're all going to sign leases in the morning. Kevin and his wife go to their hotel, and the rest of the team digs into their usual game work for the night, okay? Because they'd work like all night. Now, this is a good time to note how the team could quickly change their mind on things. Okay, they used to say back then that their unofficial motto at that time was, "We are the wind." Okay, so they would make decisions quickly. They'd make decisions very quickly and just change focus. They called these decisions bit flips. Okay, meaning like the value on a computer could change from 1 or 0, right, or on or off.
When a bit flips, yeah.
When a bit flips, right? So they do a bit flip, and around 1 a.m. that night, Romero has a bit flip. He just blurts out to the team, "I hate the winters here. I hate the snow and ice and shit." Adrian quickly agrees. Romero starts ranting about how he hates not being able to go outside at all during the winter. There were other places that were warmer. Even their old lake house in Shreveport had its charms aside from the location. They start asking themselves, do we really want to stay in Madison, Wisconsin? We're developers. We can work anywhere. Why here? We can afford something better. And as the night wore on and they had this longer conversation, they literally stretched out a physical map on the table and start like pointing at and discussing locations. Romero suggests California. Tom suggested Jamaica. Adrian says, how about Dallas, Texas?
Jamaica.
Yeah, let's just go to Jamaica.
As far as possible. As almost as if their subconscious or constantly makes them run away from their problems. But no, let's not get into this. It seems like someone should have given them the advice, and this is very useful advice, that sometimes it is good to confront your problems like they did. They went around looking for housing, and that made them kind of think about what they didn't like about previous things, and this kind of started a process. But then they kind of needed time to process, and it makes total sense that it takes a bit of time for them to realize that they are very unhappy in this situation, and they should have just said, okay, let's sleep on this for 1 day and only make rash decisions the next one. But this is something that you have to learn, and these are young people at that time, so it makes total sense that they are making these experiences.
Yeah, just nothing like in the middle of the night just being like, fuck it, let's move to Jamaica. We got money, let's do it. Fuck yeah.
But I do know that I still have to tell myself not to do this. Because it is something that you're like, especially if you like push problems away, and then you're like, okay, then you kind of start getting into them, and then you get rash about it. But you have to get like, you have to be nice to yourself and give yourself time to process. Yeah. So I'm trying to be kinder to them, because I feel like I keep forgetting that these are very young people at the time.
Yeah, early 20s.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Adrian says, how about Dallas, Texas? It was warm. It was close to apogee. Texas had no state income tax, which meant that they could keep more of the money that they brought in. I'll explain how that works in a second. Tom didn't want to go at first, and he made a list of pros and cons on the computer. Many of the good things that about Wisconsin didn't outweigh the snow. So they decide that night they're moving to Texas. They had been in Wisconsin for 6 months. Okay. And pause. So some states in the United States, they don't have, like, most of the time when you work a job and you bring in income, they just tax that income before you get it. Okay. And they just take a chunk out of it. Right. Some states, right. That's pretty normal. Some usually right-leaning states will say, instead of taxing your income, we will just have a high sales tax on like things you buy. Okay. Now, this all sounds lovely to most people when they go, cool, I can keep more of the money that I'm bringing in. But I will tell you that I think it disproportionately disadvantages poor people, because everyone has to eat food. Everyone has to put gas in their car. And it really just benefits people who are making shit tons of money at the top brackets. But anyway, that's my rant about how I think that removing income tax is stupid.
Like, so how high is what's in English the name for the tax that you pay on top of goods? Like the
sales tax.
The sales tax. How high is the sales tax?
I would say in like most states, it's different everywhere. I don't know how much it is in Texas.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes, I think I remember Tennessee had like an 11% sales tax. Okay. Generally, it's around like 5 or 6 in most states, depending. But if you don't remove income tax. But anyway, there's my side rant on. They're like, oh, cool. What a great idea. No income tax. Okay, cool.
But as a company, it makes sense to go to Texas because there's no income tax, which is,
Right. Okay, so they're like, cool, we're going to move. And then someone along the way goes, oh shit, Kevin's signing a lease in the morning. Oh yes, Kevin, the guy who just drove 19 hours to move there today with all of his stuff in his car. If Kevin signed a lease...
Sometimes I have a hard time thinking of how long is the drive from one place to another in the USA. So from where they are, the drive down to Texas would be like
19 hours.
Days, something? 19 hours.
Yes,
19,
remember when they...
right?
19. Remember when I said he drove 19 hours? Yeah, so that's... Well, technically he was in Louisiana. Texas would... I don't know this offhand, but I would guess it'd probably be about similar, probably 20-ish hours. Okay. So you could drive for almost an entire day without stopping and make it. Like, I remember, like, I was born in Pennsylvania, and I think to get to parts of Florida, you would have to drive for like 18 hours, right? And that's not even the top of the eastern United States. So very long drive. When I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, the fastest we did it in with sleeping was like a little over 3 days. And that was like really pushing it.
That's insane.
It is insane. Like I said, it's a big country. Okay, so Kevin. So what are they going to do about Kevin? It's the middle of the night, right? And so they're like, wait, if Kevin signs a lease, we're going to be stuck in Madison for 6 more months, and we hate it here. And so at 3 a.m, they all start calling Kevin at his hotel, and they're leaving all these frantic messages basically being like, don't sign the lease, Kevin, no! Kevin wakes up in the morning, and he sees all these messages, he listens to them, and he thinks, oh, I'm fired. Why else would they tell me not to sign a lease? He says to his wife, oh my goodness, they must have looked at their budget and realized that they can't hire me. And he's just real bummed.
Oh no, Kevin.
He shows up at the office at 10 a.m. and they tell him that instead, like, they're not firing him, they're moving to Texas. And he's like, oh, okay, I can move to Texas. That's closer for me anyway, right? That's closer to home. Fine. So with that, Tom and Romero, they fly to Texas. They fly to Dallas. And they start looking at real estate. Scott Miller is absolutely thrilled that the ID team is going to be living close to them, and he takes them around town to find a place to set up. They decide on an apartment complex in Mesquite that had 2-story black-tinted windows, air conditioning, and a big swimming pool. They rented 4 apartments to live in, plus another 1-bedroom loft that would be their office. Scott and his business partner, right? Seems like a good deal.
Yeah.
Here is, oh, that's not right. Is this off? Yeah. Okay. Wait, I have Dallas here. There's Dallas for you. I have your red circle.
Another fucking red circle. I know where Dallas is. That is one of the cities in the USA that I could pinpoint on a map. It's like Texas is this weird hat, and like you have the head thing, and then you go to the bottom of the uppy part of the head, and then like a thumb's width to the right, and then you got it. Somewhere around there you have Dallas.
That's about right. Yep.
I can find Dallas on a map.
Yeah.
That's it.
He says with a map. He says with a map in front of him that has Dallas on him. Yeah.
With a red circle on it.
Yeah.
That is Dallas.
So that is Dallas, yes. So here is Scott and his business partner George. For some reason, his partner George looks like he's 14 years old. Like, he looks incredibly young, but I don't know anything about George. I only know stuff about, I only really know stuff about Scott. And so this is his business partner George, and they basically take them out to dinner that night, and they're driving these really fancy cars that they had bought with their share of the money coming in from Commander Keen. And Romero thought about how, like, they just saved all their money. They didn't buy fancy things like these guys were. They're like hoarding it. And they go to an arcade, they go go-kart racing. Romero drives around in George's new car. It's like a really fun time. And Scott also tells the team he's going to up their royalties to 50% of sales, which is like crazy for this time period. And that Apogee is also going to help them create a game to fulfill their soft disk contract so that the guys can just focus on Wolfenstein 3D. But with all this, Scott also pressures them to add more to Wolfenstein than they had anticipated. What if, instead of 1 shareware episode and 2 paid episodes, there were 5 paid episodes? It wouldn't take that much longer to whip up more levels, right? And they're kind of like, I don't know, that sounds like a lot of work, but they tentatively agree to this. Okay. Now, as the team is getting ready to move, it isn't clear to me what happened, but they had some kind of disagreement with their temporary president, Mark Rain, and they fire him. So now he is actually fired. As Romero put it, quote, "That's fucking it. Boom. He's gone." I don't know what it was over, though. I couldn't ever figure out what it was.
It just seemed like they didn't really like him, like, for the entire time, because they always maintained him as temporary president. Whenever he made decisions, they seemed to criticize it, so I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it just didn't seem like it was a good fit. So this leaves id in the situation where they had nobody on the team who could actually handle the business side of things, and nobody on the team like could really spend a lot of time putting thought toward, like, I don't know, paying the bills, keeping things stocked, making sure there's food, keeping the lights on. Who would even pick up the phone when someone called? Well, it turns out that their old friend from Softdisk, Jay Wilbur, called them, and he said that he had heard they were moving to Dallas. He was finally ready to leave Softdisk, and he felt that he had fulfilled his obligation to their old boss, Al. He asks if they would be interested in having him work with the team again. They make him an offer. 5% of the company, full control over their business affairs. He excitedly agrees. The band's back together, they pick up their things, and they move to Texas.
He was like the manager of business before, right? Like, he handled all the financial stuff.
Yeah, he's a perfect fit. Here's the group photo that gets commonly passed around. One of my favorite things about this group photo is that poor Adrian is stuck in the back and you can't see his face.
You can only see half of Adrian's face. That is how his entire presence in this story feels like. Not that he's not doing anything, but just that the others try really hard to make it look like he doesn't do anything. Even though he's apparently very important for the story.
I think what's funny about it too is in this photo. So in the top thing, this is like a secret little photo. I think the top one is a secret little photo that I think was put in Wolfenstein. And you can see in that one, it's very tiny. You can see everybody smiling and they're normal and everything looks good. But in this crazy one where Romero is making like a wild face, his crazy face and antics are covering up Adrian, right? And I think there's a little metaphor there, right? He's overshadowing poor Adrian.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, the way that Romero talks about it, this place was just a great fit for them at the time. The office apartment had a shared swimming pool, so if you needed a break, you could just walk outside and jump directly into the pool. Like the door would open and there'd just be a pool there. Cool. It was warm, it was sunny, they're just totally stoked, and though, like, they're still under tremendous pressure. Though, I just read all these accounts that they are just so into the absolute madness of this development process. Like, they're just loving it. But it's like chaos, though. They're putting in 12 to 16-hour days, 7 days a week, just to try and hit Scott's goals for this game. And the game at that time contained the most art that they had ever made for a game, because not only were they trying to do, like, the sort of pseudo 3D models, but there had to be a whole bunch of new detailed textures that they were putting in the game that they hadn't used before. And Kevin and Jay help a lot in their own ways. Kevin puts a lot of work in on the art, the packaging, the marketing designs. Jay just tries to make sure that, like, the food is stocked, the bills get paid, the business runs. But, of course, in, like, their own way, they would just be, like, spontaneously really fucking weird. I mean, think about it. How could you not start going crazy in these positions? So people are working, and the next minute they're taking balls of paper and throwing them in each other's faces. They're staying up all night playing Street Fighter 2 and Fatal Fury. They're screaming German phrases like the Nazis in Wolfenstein. They're laughing maniacally because they think the high-speed killing of Nazis with tons of blood and guts was just fucking hilarious, and they're just screeching all the time. Good.
I think the bad German is still kind of one of the most iconic things about Wolfenstein, is that the Nazis always used this nonsense German.
Mm-hmm.
That is really funny. So I find it funny that they used it, and it kind of swept into the game, and then it was just it remained in the game, even though they easily had enough money to just pay one German person to say German things.
I might have a bit on this later. They recorded all of those phrases. That's them. That's their voices.
Of course,
like, I think even Adrian does one. That's why it sounds horrible.
Yes.
It was just them with like, I think like a book of German phrases trying to figure out how to cobble together German speech and then screeching it.
It's not like there's a lack of German communities in the USA. Like,
it's true.
It would have been possible.
But, yes. Although, you know, I will say that, like, the 90s, when I look back on the 90s, boy, did they not put a lot of effort into voice acting in video games.
Yeah.
Like, just, it was thought to be so cool at the time, regardless of whether it was good.
Yeah.
Carmack stayed focused through all of this madness, never deviating, never moving. He is a statue. He is focused on coding. And then the team asked him to put secret walls in the game so that they could hide secrets. And Carmack is like, I don't want to do this. It would violate the sanctity of his code. But they push him for a couple of months. They need to put this in. And it's a long story, but like when people talk about the development issues for Carmack on Wolfenstein, the fucking push walls are the thing that he talks about the most. He could not figure it out. I mean, he eventually did. But it was a significant portion of development of him trying to figure out a way that you could walk up to a wall and push it, and then it would move and then slide and you'd walk in. Because if you ever played Wolfenstein, to anybody out there, that's like a pretty significant part of the game, is kind of going around and finding these secret walls and finding stuff. I watched a stream that he did like 30 years on. Like him and Romero were talking sort of about the good old days. And his solution was, he had thought of it years later, we already had doors in the game. Why didn't we just make walls that were wall textured and they were just actually doors? We already had door tech. So you'd click on it and it would, you know, you'd tap on it, it would just open, but it would just be a wall colored door. That would have been the most elegant solution, but he spent a ton of like development time trying to figure out how to make the push walls.
Yeah, sometimes you need...
I think it made him crazy.
You need the distance to the project to see the easier solution.
Yep. Jay Wilbur's first order of business when he joined the team was to figure out who owned the Wolfenstein name. Remember we had talked about how like they had come up with all these names because they're like, we can't use Wolfenstein.
They didn't know if they were allowed to use the name yet.
Since this was before the internet, this was a very difficult task. It turned out that the company that made the original, Muse Software, had gone bankrupt and had sold off their intellectual property. It had been purchased by an older woman who was just buying up the intellectual property of businesses, and she didn't really seem to care about it at all. So the story goes is that Jay tracks her down, he offers her $5,000 to use the trademark, and she takes it, because why would she care?
I mean, that's why she buys these, right? Because she wants to make money from it. As an investment.
Yep. The decision is made. They would use the original name, make it a sequel to the original games, and since it was the third game, technically, the third Wolfenstein game, they would call it Wolfenstein 3D. As they were getting close to nearing the end of development on the shareware version of Wolfenstein, they get in touch again with Bobby Prince, still their freelance sound guy. They ask him if he would fly down to Texas with his equipment and work in their office. They said that he brought enough stuff to basically set up an entire sound studio in their apartment. As I mentioned, Tom and Romero got a German translation book and translated all the phrases that the Nazis needed to say, and the two of them did most of the voice lines in the game, though they did pressure Adrian into doing one of them. They thought that doing the death screams were the funniest to record. That's the one they had the most fun with. Just basically being, right?
Yes.
But an unintended side effect of this was Romero and Tom always up to some fucking antics. Now you've just given two of the most annoying people in the world access to microphones and sound systems to fuck with all
Instead
day.
of doing their real work, yes.
They would record screeches and weird mutterings. They would put like crazy answering machine messages on that would play when you call the office. God. I think I heard in a talk that like Tom recorded himself loudly burping and like made that into their answering machine. And from what I've read, this would really grate on everyone else on the team. And there was a story about how one night Adrian got really annoyed, said nothing to anyone, just stood up and walked out and did not come back. I mean, came back later, right? But
just
like, he was
gotta
just
take
gone.
like some fresh air away from these people,
right?
That he's stuck with for some reason.
Also around this time, FormGen, the company that was publishing the retail version of Wolfenstein, had a chat with Scott Miller from Apogee. One of the executives calls Scott and says, "Look, Scott, We don't think they should be showing blood and stirring up the World War II stuff. We're really worried about this. It's too realistic. We're going to make a lot of people upset. There's never been a game like this.
They had this discussion before, right? They wanted to...
They did. Scott's like, okay, I'll call him about it. And he calls him up and he says, FormGen thinks that the game needs to be toned down. Beef it up! And then they agreed. They were going to double down on the violence. They did this in many ways. They upped the gore, adding in skeletons hanging from chains, corpses in jail cells, blood and guts strewn around. When you beat the boss of an episode, it would say, let's see that again, and show you the death cam of the enemy you just killed. Here, because I have...
The death animations for the guys is really, really brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I have some pictures here. This is, of course, of the final release here, right? Also as a joke, because they knew it was going to be bloody, when you open the game...
PC-13 Profound Carnage.
Yes. Yeah, so to those who can't see it, it looks like a movie rating screen, and it said, this game is voluntarily rated PC-13 Profound Carnage. Then it would play over the opening screen. It would play a digital version of the Nazi Party anthem on the title screen.
Yeah.
What they did not know at the time was that their little joke where they, quote, voluntarily rated their game was the first instance of a voluntarily rated game.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, this...
A lot of first time.
This predates the ESRB in the United States, right?
Oh, man. How can these silly guys that they just want to make stupid jokes and they kind of by accident keep inventing these things that will then become industry standards.
Yep. Now, I don't have a great place to throw this in here, but the Commander Keen series did well enough that the Shareware Industry Awards gave them 2 awards that year, winning Best Entertainment Software and Best Overall. Here is a picture of Tom on the left, Jay in the middle, and Romero on the right holding their awards.
All of them wearing tuxedos. Yeah.
They look like they rented those tuxedos, if I had to guess.
They do look like that, yes. They didn't have clothes without holes in them. Or clean clothes. Or anything like that.
Yeah, we don't need the tuxes to be clean. It just kind of goes against our normal chic.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. As they got closer to the release of Wolfenstein, Romero really realized that the game was bigger than one floppy disk could handle, so they needed to figure out how people could install it with 2 disks. In 1992, there were games that did this already, but those games used proprietary installation systems. Romero was annoyed by this. He thought a tool to install a game should not be proprietary, and he set himself to creating his own tool that would install a game. I'll be brief, but in the span of 2 days, he created a program called the Installation Creation Editor, or ICE. It would allow you to copy files off of floppies and then merge them together.
Cool.
After making it work for Wolfenstein, he gave it to Apogee for free and just says, use this for your games. This is really dumb that we have proprietary installation systems. The first shareware episode of Wolfenstein 3D was ready for release on May 5th, 1992. They had playtested it over and over and found no errors, crashes, or bugs. At close to 3 a.m., they called Scott and George from Apogee and invited them over. At 4 a.m., they dialed into Software Creations, their BBS of choice, to upload the game. The upload finished, and they all high-fived each other and left to sleep. They said with this act, they thought things were going to change for them.
And they likely did, right?
Oh, they did.
Because this was internationally big. Like, this was not just the USA. This was huge.
Oh, yeah, it takes off.
Like, I remember from school that we would talk about how this game is a game that you are not allowed to play because it is absolutely... you cannot buy it in my country.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it has been removed from the so-called index by now, but when I was young, it still was on there, so you couldn't get it.
I believe I have something here. I think it got removed from the index in 2019, so only 6 years ago.
Yeah, a lot of stuff got removed from it recently because they were like, okay, things have gotten much worse in other areas, so we can kind of waive that.
So they upload it. When people would get Wolfenstein, they get a little bit of Tom's backstory. You're William J. B.J. Blazkowicz, the Allies' bad boy of espionage and terminal action seeker. Your mission, to infiltrate the Nazi fortress. Wolfenstein's release was 10 times larger than both Commander Keen releases and quickly spread throughout the PC gaming underground. It was on several BBSs, and then it started appearing in forums in paid providers like America Online and CompuServe. Emails started flooding id's inboxes. People started calling their phone. The first month, the game sold 4,000 pre-order copies at $60 a piece, which would give them 2 discs with 6 episodes and a hint book, which had not been written yet. Yeah. There was like this pricing structure that Scott had made, and it was something like, if I remember right, it was something like, oh, you could pay $30 for the other 2 episodes, $50 for all 6 episodes, and I think an extra $10 and you get a hint book and you can get all of it. And so it's like $60 total, right? And this pricing structure, you'd be like, oh, it's cheaper to get the extra 3 episodes than to just get 2, and it pushed people toward that. And so almost every person who bought the game bought all of it. Like, they wanted all of it.
So they also discovered the abusive sales strategies of today's game publishers.
Yep, absolutely. The next time a check came, just like when they were living in Shreveport, Jay yelled, "Pizza money!" And this time the check for 1 month was for $120,000. Yeah. This was it. This was an affirmation to everyone that they had done things right. They had finally made it. Jay talks about this is the moment where they realized that this had gone just beyond making some, like, having fun, making games, where they could become something much more. Romero said that as someone who grew up incredibly poor, it was crazy to move into a world where he no longer had financial pressure or even normal work hours. He could make what he wanted when he wanted to make it. It was liberating.
Didn't he work in a copper mine when he was a child?
No, his father worked in a copper mine when he was a child.
Okay, yeah.
Now, I glossed over some of this. He had some pretty grueling jobs in like his teenage years and like even like some of his work when he was a kid. But this is very different. He wanted to be doing this. They decided that they would give themselves a raise to each person, $45,000 a year. Romero said that his old mentor, John Ficini at Origin Systems, had once told him that no programmer had ever made more than $30,000 a year. Okay, so $30,000 is the most he had ever heard of. And most of the programmers left the industry before they hit 30 years old. You know, not a very easy place to work. It doesn't pay particularly well in the grand scheme of things. And they're already like crushing this and making more money than that. With all this hype, the public was only playing the shareware episode. They still had 5 more episodes to make and a book as quickly as possible. The team found out that they could crank out a level in roughly a day, but it was very boring. When Tom would get distracted, Romero would try and pump him up by chanting NSX over and over, which was the type of car that one of the Apogee owners drove, right? Like they could buy a car like that if they finished. NSX, NSX. They rip through these levels. They even let Bobby Prince make a level. They test them all, and then they start working on this hint book. I have a couple pictures from the hint book right here. The hint book is entirely available online, and it's interesting. If you look at some of these, you could see pictures of them. Adrian was rocking this pretty serious mullet at this time.
Yes.
Up there in the top right.
That's a sick mullet, man. Really good.
Sick. Top middle, right? Like Romero doing anything to hitch a ride away from Wisconsin, which I think he's trying to be sultry there. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Bottom right is Carmack just looking like he just doesn't give a shit about any of this at all. Right? He's tired of your antics.
He looks like a prime nerd. Perfect.
Top left is
I love the cat. Top left, yes.
Yep, John's cat Mitzi. Yep, she would hang out on their computers. Now, interestingly, so one of the things that they said that they had a lot of fun with was Wolfenstein, for being very fun at the time, was very rudimentary. I mean, look, what do? You go and you kill a guy and you get a key and you open a door and then you kill a guy and then you open a door and you fight a boss, right? Like, how do you make that creative, right? So they just came up with all these creative ways to say over and over, right? Like when the men in the room are horizontal, or like once you're done disposing of them, or like they came up with all these fun creative ways. But that's not what I want to draw your attention to. What I want to draw your attention to is on the right-hand page, Romero was known for being able to go through levels very quickly. So at the top of each level's description, they would list Romero's fastest time for each level. And this, from what I can tell, is the first printed instance of anyone who did speedrunning of an FPS. Okay? There had been other speedrunning before. There had been a couple of other things. This is the first time someone would speedrun an FPS that we know of. Okay? And had it in print.
Nice. And
it's possible that digital things of this existed beforehand, but they're a little hard to track down.
It's a neat idea to add this, because it kind of gives you like a reference of how fast you can do this if you try really hard. That's good.
Yep.
And especially if you can do it as fast as a developer. Developers often know good ways to do things fast. Because they kind of know all the little AI tricks that the computer enemies will not react to, or something like that, like all the dead angles and stuff like that.
Yep, and where all the secrets are, and yep, absolutely. They didn't stop working for several weeks, and they only took a break to go to Kansas Fest, which was formerly Apple Fest, if you remember. It's the convention where Romero met Jay Wilbur all those years ago. And they found out that year, Silas Warner, the original creator of Wolfenstein, was the guest of honor and was due to give a talk about his former company, Muse Software. They're like, well, this is a fantastic coincidence. They brought the world's first color laptop, which they had been carting around previously, a $5,000 Toshiba. They installed Wolfenstein on it, and then they drove 13 hours to Kansas City. They go to the panel and wait patiently until it is over. Afterwards, Silas is swarmed with coders who want to talk to him. So the id guys wait their turn, and they plop down their expensive laptop in front of him, and Romero says, "Hey Silas, we're id Software. We just did a remake of Castle Wolfenstein and put it on the market, and we brought it here so you can check it out and look at it and sign our manual." He's very excited.
Awesome.
Silas had heard of it, and he complimented them on what they created. He was happy to hear that his game lived on, even in a different form. He signed autographs for the guys, and they were just pumped. And afterward, a few of them are sitting in the hallway, and Silas came out and just sat with them on the floor and hung out with them. Romero, quote, "It was an incredible moment. The visionary who inspired us, who we idolized, had literally lowered himself to our level, ready to just hang out and talk about anything and everything. At the end of our long talk, Silas signed the Wolfenstein 3D manual that accompanied the game. That manual is still at id Software's office. I hope that someone framed it."
Dude, like, trying to meet your heroes is making yourself very vulnerable, because like this can also go very wrong, right? Like this man could have been a huge dick to them, and it was a good experience. This must have felt so nice.
Yes, and validating, I would bet.
Yes.
On June 15th, 1992, Romero made the master discs and drove them over to Scott at Apogee. It didn't take long before discs started being distributed to customers. It had taken 4 months for them to make the shareware episode of Wolfenstein, but only a month and a half to make everything else, so 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The whole thing took, this whole project, less than 6 months total, from start to finish. Crazy. So after this wildness, the team takes a brief rest. They just chill. Some of them hang out by the pool. Carmack finally went and bought himself furniture. Bobby Prince says goodbye and goes home. He's not on our screen anymore. He went home. Wolfenstein was quickly at the top spot of the Usenet list of top 100 games in the world, where it would remain for a year. Slowly, the media started to pick up on the game. They got a call from a local radio station who wanted to interview them and had their first radio interview. Channel 8 in Dallas, Texas wanted to do a piece on them and came over to film their office space. Reviews started coming in. Computer Gaming World said it was, quote, "the first game technologically capable of immersing the player in a threatening environment." Shareware magazine started calling it a virtual reality game. And people started spreading stories online of people who were so immersed in the game that they got motion sickness and would throw up. It actually came up multiple times in interviews that I had read through. Like, what do you say about the people who were throwing up?
I find that likely, since I know people that really can't handle first-person video games and would throw up if they would play them. Especially if you have never been confronted with it.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think it's kind of the equivalent of like, Andrea, my wife, can't really do VR because she gets horrific vertigo. Like, and so
I also love that the media turns that into like a story of any kind.
This
People
game
get sick sometimes.
This game was so crazy that people are throwing up. Whoa, extreme.
What will happen to our society if everybody does this now? No one will work anymore. Everybody just throwing up all the time.
Look at these long-haired punks making a puke simulator. Is this the next step for society?
And this is the first issue they have with this game. Nothing else, just this.
Yeah, funny that you mentioned that.
I bet you will get to this, that there was other issues, right?
Well, we'll talk about the German government here in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
They decide that what they would do to celebrate, because things are going so well, is that they would all go to Disney World for a week. They'd take the whole team, they'd pay for the team, their significant others, everybody. One night on the trip, they're all in a big hot tub at the hotel, and they're all talking about Wolfenstein. And there's like multiple tubs in the same room. And the next tub over is a bunch of people, and they turn and say, "Are you the guys who made Wolfenstein?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's us." And the other tub starts freaking out and saying, "Dudes, that game is awesome." And then they just like fanboy all about how great Wolfenstein is. And this was their first taste at being celebrities in the gaming world. Here are these complete strangers in a different state who are playing and enjoying their game. And they're like, whoa, being a famous game developer is really weird. That's the kind of stuff we would expect for rock stars, right? Celebrities, Hollywood folks, right? Very strange. Now, I will say this. If some of you remember the Electronic Arts episode, EA was really trying to push this angle of developers as celebrities, and it was sort of like getting out there of like the people who make the games and let's sort of venerate them. But even still, it was pretty uncommon at the time. The team felt like they had made it. And once a light was shined on the game, more eyes began to turn toward it. Many complained about the blood. There were complaints that you could shoot dogs, which Romero says he found really weird because the main point of the game is killing other people, right? Like, but they're like, okay, whatever, you're mad about the dogs. Jay received a letter from the Anti-Defamation League who were upset at the inclusion of Nazis and swastikas in video games. And when the game eventually made its way to Germany, the German government took notice. At this time, one could not display depictions of Nazis or Nazi symbols in entertainment. And so, the game was banned, as you mentioned. No surprise there at all.
So I think being put on the index is like... I think being banned is not incorrect, but it's like the game cannot be sold.
Yeah. I think it can't... What is it? It can't get a rate... This might have been... I don't know when your rating system started. Ours came post Doom in the US, but if I remember correctly, it was like once you are on the index, you can't be given a rating, and things without ratings can't be sold in stores.
It's very likely that you know this correctly. I do not. I have not researched this as thoroughly. Yeah, could be something like that. It's. But I know that it's a definition that must be like this. So this could be completely right.
Yep. Yeah. Apogee, they would try to send packages to Germany, and then they would get them returned. So they started sending out the games in less overt packaging, right? So it wouldn't be like, Wolfenstein, the game where you shoot Nazis and there's swastikas everywhere. They'd send it in just like very generic packaging so it could get through customs. CompuServe pulled the game from their service while they discussed the ban with the German council. But that brought up a question. What happens with something on the internet when it is uploaded in one country, but it breaks the law of another? There were not great answers to this question at that time, and I would argue there still really isn't, right?
Yeah, the countries can pretend that there are solutions to this, but it's, you can still freely acquire things in other ways. Yeah.
Interestingly, Wolfenstein is seen as the reason that video games had Nazi symbols in them banned in Germany. If I understand correctly, basically this was sort of the impetus for a further crackdown to make this system stricter. Okay, like that this sort of spurred tightening some of these rules on what could be in a game and what couldn't at that time.
I remember that you once told me that you basically have an episode about German video censorship in the barrel. Like if you took the time to refine it.
U.S. video game censorship.
Oh yeah, U.S. But Germany is like special about it. So I think if you could extend it to German things, it would be very interesting because Germany has a long history of asking a lot from developers to give them even the ability to publish in Germany.
Yep.
Like I've played, and I learned very late that I played a lot of censored games that were literally changed from the original game just because the German government asked the developers to do it or not be able to sell them. And Germany is a big video game market. I think it has been for a long time.
Yep. No, you're right. And I mean, look at a lot of localization that goes on in just about every country, right? Some of it is because governments ask people to do it. Others is because they try and want to see if it'll hit differently if they change it around, right? Maybe one market might appeal differently, but regardless, that ban, if I understand correctly, that ban on depicting Nazi imagery lasted until in Germany lasted until 2018, and it took until 2019 for Wolfenstein 3D to be formally struck from the index, as you mentioned. So it can be sold finally in Germany.
This does not mean, by the way, that you can now depict the Nazi symbols freely again. This just means that the definition of when you can do it and when you cannot do it, have probably just been more differentiated. And like politics has understood that there's like a tolerance here for satirical purposes. Or whatever
I think
they called it, I don't know.
I really should have dug more into this, but if I remember correctly, it was instead of just saying, is there Nazi imagery? You cannot do it at all. It would take the context of it into play. Yeah. So if the game is about killing Nazis or how Nazis are bad or how you shouldn't be a Nazi, then that would be acceptable. But a game that was like, here's a game where you are Hitler and you're the greatest guy ever, then that wouldn't be allowed, right? The context was really important, right? So,
Yep.
Okay. People were so excited for this game that they started to make mods. One of the guys played a mod at one point that swapped out Hitler for a character from a children's cartoon. Well, it wasn't a cartoon, a children's live action show at the time called Barney the Dinosaur. Do you know Barney?
Yes, I know Barney. We had Barney in Germany.
Yes. So instead of Hitler, it was Barney. Carmack and Romero were very much proponents of open and free hacking, and they were thrilled by this. But Scott and Kevin were worried. What if people took their game, cut it up, and tried to release their own version?
Yes.
What if they paid money for it, or charged money for it rather, right? So we took your code and we made Murder Barney Simulator and we want to charge $10 for it. What's the legality of that? What would that mean?
Licensing issues. Let's get into this. How did they resolve their licensing issues? I love licensing. As someone who also works in licensing adjacent industries, I really like to think about what license I have to choose to have like a reason to sue other people if they use this incorrectly. This piece of software that I wrote where, I don't know, being really pointed out on this job that I have.
Welcome to Codex Rex, the video game licensing podcast.
Oh my fucking god, not again. And so did they sue? Did they kind of try to like take legal action?
They did not sue at this point. I think they put out a statement later, but this is kind of brewing that they're like, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to like modding is such a big thing in id games, especially as we move forward, and they really struggled to figure out how to address where that should operate.
Video game companies struggle how to handle it to this day. Like some publishers take other approaches than others.
Yes.
Like it's kind of an open topic still.
Absolutely. Now, this is getting ahead of the timeline, but Wolfenstein won a bunch of awards over that next year, including the People's Choice Award and Best Entertainment Software categories at the 1993 Shareware Industry Awards. Best Arcade Game from Compute in 1992, Most Innovative Game and Best Action Game from Video Games and Computer Entertainment. The Reader's Choice Action Arcade Game Award from Game Bytes, Best Action Game in Computer Gaming World. The list goes on and on. In an interesting turn of events, just 9 months after they turned down Ken Williams' offer to work at Sierra, they ran into him at the 1993 Cody Awards, which at the time was a black tie event and was the industry's version of sort of like the Oscars.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Romero, Carmack, Tom, and Adrian are all there in tuxedos because Wolfenstein had won Best Action Game of the Year. I have here... This is a really boring screen, right? It just says Best Action Game of the Year, blah, blah, blah. Best Wolfenstein 3D, Apogee. Almost all of the other games had screenshots of their games. Of oh, look, it's whatever game. It's fucking Sonic. He's the best or whatever. This is just basically a blank tiled screen with the words Wolfenstein 3D on it. I assume because they were terrified to show the cover of a game that had a man blasting Nazis apart with swastikas on it.
Yes.
So, but anyway, so they're there and they're accepting this award, and who do they run into but Ken from Sierra? And it was the first time a shareware title had won the award. They were the smallest company to win, and had Sierra taken the deal, the award would have gone to them. They saw Ken after the show and they started teasing him and were waving the trophy around and going, "This could have been yours, Ken." And Ken says, I know, I've made mistakes like that before. Believe me, it wasn't the first. It won't be the last. And Romero said, "We laughed, although maybe Ken wasn't laughing quite as hard as we were."
I bet that's felt good. And I also bet
for
that
sure.
Ken was fine with it.
Yeah, he's got enough going on,
Dude, the design of this game, Tyler just switched slides and it just showed new pictures of Wolfenstein. And it just looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's depicting a lot of Nazi imagery, but it really catches the vibe very well. So even though Tyler was very worried that I would be unhappy about this episode, that he wanted me to be to that I could talk about whatever I want because he didn't want to smear my German heritage or something. But I'm fine with this. And I'm always impressed when I look at Wolfenstein games because they do such a good job at designing the entire games very well. It's it looks really cool.
Yeah, it does look really cool. These boxes are really cool. Yeah. But the team returns from their vacation. They need to figure out what their next game is going to be, right? And they needed something to give FormGen to satisfy their retail contract. So they decide to make a spin-off prequel to Wolfenstein called The Spear of Destiny. Here it is. Look at this cover.
This looks so cool.
Right? Totally shirtless guy whose muscles are so muscly that I'm worried they're going to bust out of his skin. And he's breaking into this case that has the Spear of Destiny, which we'll talk about in a second here. Computer Gaming World says, "The player is there like no game I've ever played. The sound and the visual action are frighteningly realistic."
This is really good.
So, it is really good. They wanted to play around with the idea that Hitler had been searching for artifacts that might win him the war, and that he found and stole the Spear of Destiny, which was said to have been the spear that pierced Jesus during the crucifixion. Unsurprisingly, you might imagine, you have to kill a ton of Nazis to get it back. Instead of multiple episodes, it would just be 21 levels with some new bosses thrown in, which was a lot less work on having to design a bunch of new stuff for the episode. Or for each episode, rather, if you'd broken it up. It used the same engine they had built, so Carmack was free to work on other things. And what he decided to work on was improving the Wolfenstein engine. Carmack was really excited to get back into R&D mode. In the meantime, while he's working on this, they're working on that, Romero reaches out to a company called Raven Software. I had not mentioned them before. The company was owned by two brothers who the team had met in Wisconsin. So remember how it was like, oh, there's no video game developers in Wisconsin? Well, there were some, and Raven Software was there, two brothers. And originally Romero had asked them back in, when they were living in Wisconsin, if Raven Software wanted to license the Keen engine, but the deal didn't really work out. It didn't fit what they wanted. And Raven just wanted to make stuff for the Amiga at that time. But since then, their company had grown, and Romero asked them if they were interested in using the Wolfenstein engine. And at first, Raven said that the engine was too simple, but Romero told them that Carmack was working on new stuff. Better lighting and fog, better texture mapping, the ability to change the height of walls and ceilings. With all this, Raven is in, they sign a licensing deal. And the arrangement culminated in a game called Shadowcaster, which was a first-person RPG. So you kind of one of those games where you'd click to move, similar to Ultima Underworld, right? So it wasn't like free moving, you'd click to move. Romero said that Raven's pivot to PC development made him want to work with them again, thinking that they might be able to develop a PC game for it in the future. So more than just use our engine, maybe you could do something for us. And while Shadowcaster wasn't fast, it did, like I said, have graphical updates like sloping floors, lighting, fog. Okay. And this is where Romero said that they established their pattern for the company. Carmack would work on improving their tech and make new engines. Romero would push the potential of those engines from a design or gameplay perspective. And then, after they had made a product, they would take their existing engine and they would license it out to other companies. So this was just giving them a steady stream of revenue and always having something to do.
So they could basically sell their products to gamers, but also to game developers.
Yes.
Yep.
They could tap into multiple markets.
Yep.
And they're leveraging shareware, and they're leveraging retail. They're everywhere. Okay. Now, around this time, Romero had formed a good working relationship with a guy named Sean Green, who I had mentioned previously in a previous episode. He was head of Apogee's tech support. Do I have a picture of him? There's Sean.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He was head of Apogee's tech support, and he would share stories with Romero about what was going on inside of Apogee. And if you remember, I think last episode I said that Romero was kind of a little worried that the Apogee relationship wasn't going to work out, right? And Sean was getting a lot of phone calls because he's doing tech support. And often it was people calling to complain about the content of Wolfenstein. So they're just calling to bitch. But there were a lot of calls from people who were unable to order id's games. So you're probably thinking, well, what was the process for ordering a game, right? To order a game, you would call a number, okay, that would be in the game. That would then put you in touch with a sales representative. Who were the representatives? Sean tells Romero that hiring at Apogee consisted of putting flyers up around town that said, "Do you like to play games? Can you handle talking on the phone and playing games all day for $6 an hour?" So not high professionalism here, right? Just like college students who sat around completely unsupervised, doing whatever the fuck they wanted. Things would go off the rails quickly, as things do with a bunch of college students who were getting paid to play video games all day. And I guess that they had no computer network or records to track orders. When they would get a call, they would take a customer's credit card info, shipping address, everything, and they would physically write it down on slips of paper, and then they would stick them onto a metal spike like you would put down an order in a restaurant. And then at the end of the day, Scott's mom would come around and she would pick up all the spikes and she would take them over to a word processor on her computer and put them in there, and that's how fulfillment would begin.
God.
But there was no digital system. They had no templated order form. They had no fulfillment workflow. They didn't have a customer database. All the basic stuff that you might need to run a business like this. And I will tell you, these systems existed at the time.
They did, yep.
They were not super common, but they existed. Romero's just pissed. He tells all of this to Kevin Cloud, and Kevin's like, well, let's test this. And he calls Apogee, just normal time, middle of the day. They left Kevin on hold for 30 minutes before he spoke to somebody. And so the team starts talking about this because there's no way that they could calculate negative customer experiences on how many sales that they had lost because Apogee has this shitty system. Plus, if you're calling in, you want to buy an id Software game and you can't get through to them, that might make id look bad, not Apogee. They're not going to remember, oh, the Apogee game. So they're all pissed. And they start talking, maybe we need to break off with Apogee. Why should they have to give up so much of our money to a company that's no longer doing anything for us? So Romero calls Scott, and he tells Scott, you have 3 months. That'd be around November of that year to fix your fulfillment issues. Internally, the team starts making other plans. Romero talks to Carmack about this and kind of pushes again. Maybe we need to independently distribute our own games. We'd be able to keep more of our money. We'd have full control of our own brand. Now, Carmack seems to have had mixed feelings about this. Carmack always has mixed feelings about anything other than making games. A quote. As he often told the guys, all he cared about was being able to work on his programs and afford enough pizza and Diet Coke to keep him alive. He had no interest in running a big company. The more business responsibilities they had, things like order fulfillment and marketing, the more they would lose their focus, making great games. There's no wrong answer on this. I want to be clear.
I don't think so.
I don't think Carmack is totally off base. He's like, the more we grow, the harder this is going to be for us to keep doing the shit we want to do. But they're like, yeah, but also our fulfillment partner is fucking us over. What do we do? Right? However, the rest of the team, they want to go in on this, and they convince him, and they assure him, we'll take care of this. You can take care of coding, and we'll be independent. If Scott and Apogee don't upgrade their systems, we're going to break off. In August of 1992, they're still working on Spear of Destiny, and one day, they randomly get a call from Atari. Atari has 2 requests from id. The first, some folks at Atari loved Wolfenstein 3D and wanted to know, could it be ported to the Lynx? If you remember, it was their handheld at the time. The guys at id are very into this because they liked the Lynx enough that if you look closely in Commander Keen 4, 5, and 6, the device strapped to his wrist is an Atari Lynx. It is a Lynx, yes. Quote, as an additional request, they told us they needed a mascot to match Nintendo's Mario and Sega's Sonic and wondered if we were interested in that creative conundrum. It took Tom Hall just a few minutes to design Pounce the Lynx, a cat that jumps like Mario and runs fast like Sonic. Tom tells their contacted Atari about this character, and then nothing comes from this. They're like, okay, weird, whatever. So the team gets to work on porting the game over to the Lynx. Interesting experience for them because they had to do a bunch of things to take Wolfenstein and scale it down to the tech. And then after a couple of weeks, Jay comes in and tells everybody to stop working on porting things to the Lynx. The Atari rep had called and told Jay that Atari was in a really bad way and that it was possible that they were just never going to get paid for any of this work. And it was also possible that Atari was probably headed for bankruptcy.
Yeah. I was wondering, this was about like the end times of Atari, right?
Yes. If any of you listen to our Atari Jaguar episode, you would know that this is the end times for Atari. So just thought I'd throw that little snippet in there. But they ditch all their work on the Lynx. That's done. Carmack goes back to working on the Shadowcaster engine, i.e. the Wolfenstein engine, and the rest of the team keeps working on Spear of Destiny. Now, around this time, they get a call from a publisher called Imagineer, who published games on the Super Nintendo. Jay picked up the phone and talks to them a bit, and then he told the team afterward that the company was offering $100,000 up front for this port. Everyone is like, you're kidding. And he's like, I'm totally serious. That is a lot of money for an advance, especially just on a port. And if you remember, $100,000 is what they asked Sierra for,
and that Sierra
right? So
them, yes.
And they're just like, yeah, $100,000 up front. The team says yes immediately, and then they have a meeting on what they're going to do. They still had to finish Spear of Destiny, and then they wanted to figure out what to do after that. There's only 6 people on the team at the time, okay, who are actually making games. And they didn't want to turn into a porting company. So they couldn't say they said yes, but then they thought maybe they needed some help. It was suggested that maybe they bring someone on to do the port. And they had met this person at Kansas Fest, who at the time was referred to as Burger Bill. Okay, first name's Bill. Burger Bill is what they would call him in the industry. Burger Bill had been a celebrity in the Apple II community and was called Burger Bill because he reportedly had a bad habit of taking hamburgers and then putting them in his desk and then eating the hamburgers over a period of days.
That's healthy. Yep.
Okay? Super gross. But Burger Bill was a talented developer, and he knew how to develop games for the Super Nintendo, and he was using an unauthorized device at this time called a Sluggo 3, which would let you bypass the usual lengthy process of becoming an authorized Nintendo developer, because some of you might know, or if you listen to previous episodes or know about this, but Nintendo would be very, very picky about letting you have access to their hardware and letting you have access to development tools, and you had to go through a whole process to do this. And so Bill has one of these sort of underground ways to develop that you don't need this authorized software. You can just do it anyway. And the team is like, okay, Bill knows more about this than we do, way more than we do. Let's give them a call. And Jay calls Bill. They agree to do the port, sending over all the source code, asking for updates, right? And they're like, yeah, we could just, give this to Bill, finish what we're doing, pay Bill $100,000 in the bank. We got this great guy who'll do it for us. Cash the check, forget it. On to that later. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Just put that in the back of your mind.
It's going to work out fine.
There's a port hanging around.
Yeah,
Burger Bill's got it. The team is really digging into Spear of Destiny, but most of them are starting to get bored. They are very bored of designing Castle Wolfenstein levels. They've drawn all these mangled Nazis and the places that those mangled Nazis would exist in. Tom really struggled to knock out levels and just wanted to go back to working on Commander Keen.
The other game
Romero,
where they just
right?
struggle to create levels all the time. Oh man, I really miss this game that we did 5 million episodes on.
But that was his baby he did 5 million episodes on.
It was his baby, yeah.
Yes.
And he only agreed to Wolfenstein because he believed that they would go back to Commander Keen, yeah.
Poor Tom. So, Romero would, again, just push him to try and work on Spear of Destiny levels, constantly remind him how much money they're making, what they could do with it. Tom would get bored, and when he would, the crazy antics would ensue. And Carmack just gets sick of this. And one night, Carmack stands up, unplugs his whole computer, and he says, I think I'm going to get more done by doing this myself in my apartment, and then left. He did not come back to the office for several weeks. Poof, gone. Spear of Destiny was shipped to FormGen by the end of August and released on September 18th, 1992. The entire game had only taken the team 2 months, though it was only a single episode game. The team was so excited that for the second time they had a physical game on shelves. They made t-shirts with the character BJ shooting his chain gun and the id logo on the back, and people would get really hyped when they would see them in public. They would go into gaming stores and people would know who they were. They started to become recognizable. And very rare, I just want to reiterate, very rare that this would happen to anyone else. Now, Spear of Destiny didn't sell as well as the shareware game, but it was still making cash. I read somewhere that around this time now they were up to maybe $150,000 a month. They bumped their own salaries up to $60,000 a year. Carmack bought a red Ferrari 328 and then took it to get supercharged. Now he has a car, a really nice car. They keep winning shareware awards. At a game developers conference that year, an executive from Electronic Arts spoke in a workshop about how Wolfenstein had become incredibly popular by word of mouth alone with very little marketing. There was a discussion in the industry if this was the future of the gaming market. And when you think about shareware, it's interesting, right? We've talked about this already. What is shareware other than a lengthy demo, right? And they thought at the time, okay, even, maybe only 1 or 2% of people who play this are actually going to buy it. But, this model works, right? Even if it's just a small percentage, the model is hitting a large number of people. Now, this is skipping ahead a little bit, but another company calls at one point and they speak with Jay. And their name was Wisdom Tree, and they made games with a religious theme. They asked if they could license the Wolfenstein engine for a religious game of their own. They wanted to make a first-person shooter on Noah's Ark. Okay? And this game itself has a really weird story where, the original guy wanted to make, a Hellraiser game, of the movie, and then they realized that wouldn't really work, so then it turned into, a religious game on Noah's Ark. Jay chatted with them about how Nintendo wouldn't allow games with religious themes on their console, but they told Jay, we're going to release this game independently. Okay. Jay makes a licensing deal, which resulted in the creation of, here it is, Super 3D Noah's Ark. I have played this game.
What?
I have played this game.
Oh, it does. It even looks like it's just like it's just a cover up of Wolfenstein, because there's, like, you remember in Wolfenstein there's these levels where there's pictures of Hitler on all the walls, and
yes,
there's here just like pictures of Noah on all the walls.
He's just like smiling.
And he's got like a slingshot, and he's being attacked by bears.
The idea is that you were on Noah's Ark and all of the animals had escaped and needed to go back to bed. And so you would use your slingshot to fire food at them, and they would eat the food and get sleepy, and then they would fall over.
How wholesome.
This game is terrible. I played it on my stream on a night where I was only playing bad games, but it's kind of like notorious in the gaming community for like weird shit that gets done with id's engines. You can still buy it on Steam, by the way. It's out there. Cool. What was fascinating about it? What was fascinating about it was you would have to plug an actual Super Nintendo game into the top of it, because you needed an official Nintendo cartridge to bypass the boot up system. So you had to have two games and you plug it in. It was a mess. But anyway, Super 3D Noah's Ark. Okay.
Cool.
And I kind of think this touches on a bigger thing. We've talked about this a little. We don't need to dig too much more. But if you wanted to make a game back then, right, you had to start from scratch. But with id starting to license out their engine, you now had a basic framework ready to go. And you could just focus on making what you wanted within the limitations of the engine. And so I think that, in the addition to the shareware market and all the stuff they're doing, the idea of licensing out an engine really starts taking off with id. When Carmack returns from his multi-week isolation, he had made serious progress on his new engine. He had figured out how to add two important things. First, he added diminished lighting, meaning that if something got farther away from the player, it would become more shrouded in shadow. Mm-hmm. Wolfenstein, for example, had the exact same lighting in every room, but with this engine, you could give depth. Second, he figured out how to better change floors and ceilings, including the addition of textures and the ability to change the height of walls. You could see open sky in some places. He added slopes. He added hills. Kevin was so enamored by this new tech that he spent 20 minutes just running up and down a single hill. The team, so funny to think what small things were so important back then, right?
Yeah. So I can still imagine, I could imagine it, like, even when building this now, like, if you figure something out that has been difficult to you before, you just try it out several times because it's so fun to do, even if it's something simple from today's perspective.
The engine was probably at its limit, but Carmack would go back into R&D mode and create something new from what he had learned. And there's a weird story around this time about Carmack. So, like, I told you that there's a lot of stories going around about this guy about how people would say he was just kind of robotic and, like, almost disconnected from other people. And one that stuck out to me was that cat Mitzi that I showed you in the picture. All the guys knew her. And when he was living in the office, the cat would hang around and sit on all their monitors until they overheated, and then they'd, like, shoo her away. She's always around. And she had been a sidekick for Carmack for so long that in the staff directory, she was listed as Carmack's sidekick. But when Carmack started spending less time with her, she became irritable and she started attacking people.
Oh, no.
One day, right? Very sad. One day, Carmack came back to his place and found cat piss all over his new leather furniture. And he just took her to an animal shelter. Gone. He came into the office, and everybody in the office starts freaking out. Why would he do that? And he just robotically said to them, Mitzi was having a net negative impact on my life. That was his response. And Romero said, you know what this means? They're going to put her to sleep. No one's going to want to claim her. But Carmack didn't care and just went back to his work. I don't even know what to say about that, so we can just move on.
Let's just move on. I don't know. Poor Mitzi.
Poor Mitzi. Two things happened in November of 1992 that are of note. First, Apogee did not upgrade their ordering infrastructure. The team decides, time to cut the deal. Jay calls Apogee and told them that id would be publishing their next game on their own. Scott took the news in stride, said he was grateful that the relationship had lasted as long as it did, and Apogee was doing fine at the time because they had just put out their own title, Duke Nukem, which was starting to surpass Wolfenstein on the shareware charts, and they were already working on a second Duke Nukem entry. So they're like, okay, we appreciate it. Cool. But as part of this split, they tell them, we're also taking your tech support employee, Sean Green. Sean Green gets dragged along. He officially joined the team to handle customer support since they had been looking for that for years. He started in January of 1993.
Awesome.
So now Sean's on the team. Yep. They had only signed a 6-month lease on the apartments they were living in and working out of, so they decided it was time to upgrade to a real office. They've been working out of apartments for now, or in the lake house and wherever. They decided on an office on the 6th floor of a gigantic black building in town called the Town East Tower, or as the team called it, the Black Cube. They decided on an office on the 6th floor of a gigantic black building in town called the Town East Tower, or as the team called it, the Black Cube. I'm realizing I don't have a picture for you, but it literally looked like a gigantic shiny black cube, like just windows on the outsides, like almost like tinted black windows. And it was huge. Their office was right next door to a dentist, so they would often hear the screams of people going through procedures. One day, they listened to the gory sound of a man getting an emergency tracheotomy.
Oh boy.
Yeah. The new place had a reception area where they could put awards that they had won and a designated meeting room with custom black furniture, 2 offices and a larger developer's room. In their kitchen, they had a foosball table and a Pac-Man machine. They turned a large closet into a dedicated gaming room with consoles and, quote, a table that we regularly kicked apart out of anger at a game.
It's the anger table.
This fucking
We
game.
destroy it, and then we pay
Yes.
we pay a carpenter to repair it again. Because we were fucking rich, man.
Yeah, we got money. We could buy Ferraris. We could buy a new table. Fuck tables.
Yeah, something I noticed is that they kind of once they moved to Texas, they kind of stopped taking care of their money as well. There's
just a lot flowing in.
Yeah.
So they were like, screw it. Romero and Carmack took the 2 separate offices. Adrian and Kevin took a room together, and in the larger room they put a pool table, and Tom also set up shop in there. Tom thought that maybe they could put up some walls in the large room and make it his office, but that would take a while. So he put tape on the floor to show, quote, where the walls to my office would be if I had an office.
Oh no.
They also bought even more of the Next Step workstations. Romero said it was hard to explain to non-programmers what an upgrade it was, but allowing everyone to code faster and make better-looking products was important to them, so they went in on this. If you were in MS-DOS, you would only run code that worked for Intel chips, and Macintosh only let you run code for Motorola chips, but Next Step stations let you support 4 different types of chips at one time. Quote, it was nothing short of amazing. You just copied your file from one machine to the other, and it automatically ran the correct code for that hardware. So big upgrade for them. They have a new office, new machines, bunch of money. What are they going to do next? For once, they actually had the benefit of time. They didn't need to rush. This was a luxury that they had never been afforded before. Their games had truly revolutionized the industry in many ways, but they had all been done on very short timelines, fueled by death schedules and tight deadlines.
Did they immediately fall into midlife crisis? like
What do we do? I don't know what to do with time. I have to work every single hour of every day. I have to work in my sleep. Fuck. They had a series of meetings in their fancy new conference room where they talked about game ideas. The team collectively thought that 3D was the future, and that was the direction that they should all go in. Everyone was also ready to move on from Wolfenstein, especially Tom. Again, Tom reminds the team he really wants to go back to Commander Keen. And at first, there's some interest there. Like, what if we made the Vorticrons in 3D? But then the conversation shifts to other things. Commander Keen is ditched again.
No.
It was decided that the technology was too fast-paced for a game aimed at children. Plus, I again got the gist that the team just really was done with Keen at this point. Tom is very disappointed. He's very disappointed. He had been holding out through all of this, hoping for Keen. In these meetings, Carmack starts talking about some of his narrative from his old D&D campaign. What if instead of Nazis, it was demons pouring into maybe, let's say, a base from portals to hell? This idea seems promising. The talk moved forward about how maybe they could upend some tropes about demons and set it in the future so that they could make high-tech weaponry to shoot demons with. Tom comes up with a story about how there would be 4 characters, all stationed on a planet called Tai Tenga Darkside, and they would all fight demons together. Romero is in. Something like that had not existed before, and there would be a market for it.
I'm pretty sure the first Doom was set on Mars already, right? So yeah, so this game will also never exist like that. So it's
yeah, there will be changes. Kevin and Adrian get excited at the prospect of drawing weird art. They all collectively decide that the game's vibe will be a combination between the movie Evil Dead 2 and Aliens. But how to decide on a title? Carmack already had an idea. Here's a passage from Romero's book about the conversation. Carmack said he had the perfect name. Quote, "I was watching the movie The Color of Money," quote, he told us. "We were familiar with it. It was the one starring Tom Cruise as a pool hustler. There's a scene," Carmack says, "there's a scene where Cruise walks into a pool hall with his cue case and hands over some money to challenge another guy. So the guy looks up at Cruise and says, 'What you got in there?' The camera pans up to Cruise, who has a confident ear-to-ear smile. Carmack had the same smile on his face. And Cruise looks at him and smiles and says, 'In here, Doom.'"
Oh.
We all cracked up. It was the perfect name for the ominous hellscape game that we wanted to make.
That makes it so weird.
And that is the end of our
this
episode.
This comes from a Tom Cruise movie.
Yes, about pool. About fucking playing
Yes.
pool.
Amazing.
Yep, I've watched the clip, and it's like Tom Cruise has this crazy grin, and he goes, "In here, Doom." And they're just, the guy like sighs and was like, "Oh, okay, like, let's do it." So that's it. We made it through the Wolfenstein episode, and we are now on to Doom.
So that will be episode 4, then the next one will be the Doom episode. Awesome.
The next one will be the Doom episode,
Nice.
episode 4. Yep. Any takeaways from this before we finish up?
This was cool. John Carmack really hasn't done himself a favor by basically euthanizing his cat. I'm not gonna patronize our audience and tell them not to get a cat if they don't want to take care of it. You know that it's an animal. Just take care of it. What the fuck, man? That's crazy. I can't stop thinking about that. That's the only thing that really bothers me.
Yeah.
But it was cool. Nice to hear.
I'm with you.
And it's all coming together, right? Because this Wolfenstein 3D basically sets the stage for Doom perfectly, and they basically just have to use the improved technology now to make. What I'm wondering about here is they were tired of making Wolfenstein 3D levels, but now they set themselves up with the game that will look like it will not be a Wolfenstein 3D mod, but it will kind of be like a technically updated version of Wolfenstein 3D, and then they just have to make more Wolfenstein 3D levels again. So this is odd.
I will say this. This is getting ahead of ourselves into the next episode, but the editor that they had for Doom allowed them to be way more creative than what they could be in Wolfenstein, because Wolfenstein was very flat, and the more interesting stuff you could make was sort of like a flat maze with
there was
hidden
these
walls,
steps in
and
Doom,
where
right?
you put an
could go up
enemy.
and down, right? I remember that. That was big.
There were slopes. There was sky. There were things that you could shoot into, so you could like shoot through a window. For example, there was so much you could play
and you
with.
Had these
and we didn't even talk about the multiplayer.
Right, and you had those parts where you go like it feels like you go into the open. Yeah, that was cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I get it.
Yep.
This should be
There was
interesting.
a lot more
Yep.
variety. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think for me, big takeaways from this episode were this to me is their first real offering. It is when they make, like, Commander Keen was big, but this was big. And I think that this game was, you know, and this is something we could cover in a later episode, but this game was sort of the start to me of a lot of eyes focusing on the gaming industry, focusing on the computer gaming industry, focusing on what censorship should be like, if at all governments were interested in this. I think the potential for pushing speed running forward, I think the voluntary rating thing, I think the licensing of engines, all of this to me is fascinating in ways that you can see the industry moving forward, right?
Tons of firsts here. Yeah. Yep.
So that's what's fascinating to me. So, okay. Well, I want to thank Andre for doing our podcast editing. I want to thank you, Docs, for hanging out for 3 of these episodes now. I want to thank your child for screaming angrily in the background in joy, because a happy baby means that you're a good dad. And last but not least, I want to go ahead.
Yes, that is what that means.
Take credit. You're allowed.
Okay.
And I want to thank everybody who listens to all of these. We are now at the halfway point, and it only ramps up from here. So thanks to all of you who have stuck with us. Things are about to get crazy.
Thank you for making this episode. This was fun.
Of course, it was fun. All right. We will see you all for the next one. Have a good one. Later, friends.
Bye.
And I'm back, and I'm eating my coconut cake. Coconut cake, coconut cake. It is cake with coconut flavor, but not just the flavor, also the consistency. Consistency. I will eat all the coconut cake. I have made it not myself, but someone else did. But as is the rule with publicly available cake, is that anyone who eats it. Yeah. Coconut cake.
Pause. Oh, man. Cookie gurgles.
We shouldn't have eaten those cookies, man.
Those cookies.
It was a mistake. It was a fucking mistake.
Oh, my insides, my organs. Okay. What the fuck is wrong with me?